Hey everybody. Okay, we're going to try a new thing here. This is a PowerPoint that I've got ready for you, but I'm going to record it with me talking over it so you can have it to remember to play back whenever you want as a reference. Okay, so start of year 8 geography, landscapes and landforms. What does the world look like around us? Okay, so hang on, let's make this work. Okay, so landscapes, what are they? So basically landscapes are a section of the Earth's surface with similar features. Okay, and they can be natural, happen naturally, they happen by geological forces and erosion and things like that, or they can be landscapes that we create as humans. Okay, so mountains, um, coastal landscapes, desert landscapes, grasslands, there's types of landscapes. Human landscapes are obviously cities, urban environments that we have created. Okay, so our first one we're going to look at is a mountain landscape. And throughout these slides, I'm just going to talk about um, some of the different landforms that make up those landscapes. So the landforms are the individual types of geographical feature that make up the landscape. And they're not all the ones, these aren't the only ones in each one, but there's some of them. So in a mountain landscape, obviously, we get a mountain. That's the first thing. And a mountain is, we all know a mountain, it's a raised piece of land that generally comes to a peak, a point at the top. Okay. Now, a ridge is another form of landform within a mountain landscape, and that's where two bits of raised land come together to form a continuous raised piece of land. It doesn't come to a point at the top, it's continuous and it joins two sides together. So it's a ridge line. See that person walking on one there. And then a valley, and we all know what a valley is. It's the opposite of a ridge, really. It's the center of two in between two large pieces of raised land. So that's a mountain landscape. And there are other things in there as well, but maybe you can investigate them. Okay, coastal landscapes are our next one. What do we get in them? Well, a stack. Stack is a piece of rock that's on the coastline that's been eroded all around it, and it's just left standing on its own. There's an example there. And there's a famous Australian example that in the questions to follow, I'm going to ask you to find out. So that's a stack. A beach, obviously, we all know a beach. It's where the land meets the sea, but obviously it's where pebbles or sand have been eroded into a flat surface. Okay, and of course that's a process of erosion that makes either pebbles or sand there. And a headland, as you can see here, a headland is a piece of land that sticks out to the sea. It's covered on three sides by water. Okay, so that's one of the many things part of a coastal landscape. There are many, many others. Okay, riverine landscapes. Well, these are landscapes where rivers run. One of the landforms there could be a floodplain, and a floodplain is the area around the river that when the river's in flood, floods out. There's an example of a river that's flooded out. A lot of areas rely on this to water the plants around there. Naturally, the floods happen, brings everything back to life. The River Murray used to be flood a lot before we tamed it with dams and so on. The riverbed, well, that's the part of the river there. There's a dry riverbed where the river flows on top of it. And a billabong, that's an Australian term for an oxbow lake, that's where a lake, sorry, I do apologise, where a river has had a part of its flow cut off, and now it stands on its own as a lake. It used to be part of the river, but the river's been diverted and left this behind. I really should include an aerial shot there of that. But yeah, it's just a freestanding piece of water that used to be part of a river, but isn't now because it's changed. But in Australia, we call them billabongs. And moving on. Desert landscapes. Okay, lots of things in desert landscapes. We're an oasis, not a British rock band from the 90s. This is a piece of water that appears from under the ground in a desert landscape. An Inselberg is the most famous Inselberg probably in the world. An Inselberg is a piece of rock that just comes out of nowhere from the flat plains. Just stands on its own. It's got nothing else around it. It's all the same kind of rock. And of course, that's a very famous Inselberg. I'll ask you what that rock is called, that Inselberg is called, in the questions coming up. An alluvial fan. An alluvial fan, you can see here, see how that's all fanned out? That's where a river has taken sediment down and spread it out into a fan shape. You see that through those mountains there, how the water has at some point run down there and it's spread out into a fan. That's called an alluvial fan shape. Okay. Karst landscapes. Now these are basically cave landscapes. Okay, so within a karst landscape you can have a spring, which is water that has kind of come to the surface. Much a bit like an oasis we talked about in deserts, but this is in kind of a plain landscape. So there's a spring. A cave, we all know a cave. It's an opening in the ground, but it's got an opening there. Okay, you go underground. And within caves, you can have stalactites. They hang down, and of course, stalagmites go up. Okay, so that's a karst landscape. And plains landscapes, plains like areas of very flat grasslands. Now, these are some of my favorites. A butte. A butte is a piece of rock that is kind of stands up and generally has a flat top. These are famous ones in Arizona. I think they are called the mittens. So they just stand up out of nowhere, and they generally have a flat top. A mesa is like a butte but bigger. Okay, so it comes from out of the ground. Everything around it's been eroded, and it's got that nice flat top on it. And a plateau is just like the other two, but even bigger. So there's a massive piece of land that is raised and is flat on the top, and we call that a plateau. And that's the end of that. Okay, so hopefully I'll produce some more of these to explain some of the other geography topics. Oh, not used to the switching it off yet. Hang on.